They are the remotest of nations, the most just of men, the favorite of the gods. The lofty inhabitants of Olympus journeyed to them to take part in their feasts. Their sacrifices are the most agreeable of all that mortals can offer them. This is how Homer described the Nubians around 3,000 years ago, an African people who lived along the banks of the river Nile. When I was growing up, I used to hear people in my neighborhood talking about black pharaohs. We called them Nubians. I never dreamed that there was an actual place called Nubia. It seemed more like a fairy tale to me. I'm in Cairo at the beginning of my journey in search of ancient Nubia. From here, I'm heading south along the Nile to Aswan, Egypt's southernmost city where Nubia begins. Then I'll cross over into the Sudan and travel to the heart of the ancient black kingdoms of the Nile. Egypt is the only ancient African civilization most people have heard of. Nobody knows anything at all about Nubia. I've wanted to see the pyramids since I was a child, and it's taken me 40 years to get here. I can see why people are obsessed with this place. This extraordinary royal tomb was built for an Egyptian pharaoh 4,500 years ago. Egypt has become a place of pilgrimage for African Americans trying to rediscover their identity. And for many of us, Nubia is just a black word for Egypt. So why have you come to Egypt?
I think for me it's just been a dream come true, and then trying to make a connection to a historical past that we've been misled about all this time. And so,
What do you mean we?
Oh, I mean we, I say, in terms of African American people, when we look at the history of Egypt, we've always been told that Egypt is out of Africa, not a part of Africa, and to actually be on the continent for me is just a really a big thrill.
We were growing up, though, in school. All the pharaohs looked like white guys. I mean, they could have been from Milwaukee or someplace, or Minnesota like you are. But what was that about?
I think it was to continually enslave us. I come to get a sense of my history, and not the history that was given as African American in America by the Europeans.
Mm-hmm. Well, who do you think built the pyramids?
I think Africans built the pyramids. I grew up believing that they were European, or they looked like Europeans. They were white. You know, the Cecil B. DeMille story. And I think they were Nubians, which is dark skin.
About your color, darker?
I think all shades. Mm-hmm. I think all shades. Just like African Americans becoming lighter. Yeah.
Just like this group?
Yeah. Exactly.
Back home, the real Nubians have got lost in a debate about the color and origins of the ancient Egyptians. But 400 miles south of here, there is still a real place called Nubia, the home of an ancient African civilization that was definitely black. How much a t-shirt? 5 pounds? Too much. I want the Nubian price. I'm a Nubian. I'm taking the night train from Cairo to Aswan. Once, all the land along the Nile, south of Aswan as far as Khartoum in the Sudan, belonged to Nubia. It still exists, but now it's just a region split in two by the border between Egypt and Sudan. I was hoping there was another room in there. Well, it's cozy. African Americans are obsessed with Nubia. There must be 1,000 shops in America with the name Nubia in the title. My favorite, my daughter's favorite, is a shop called Nubia Notions. But believe me, there are a whole lot more. When I was applying to Yale, the first sentence of my application said, "My grandfather is colored, my father is a Negro, and I am black." Now my daughters are African Americans. Their kids, I bet, will be Neo-Nubians. You know, if we can't tell exactly what the color of the Egyptian pharaohs were, the one thing we do know is that the Nubian pharaohs were black people. And now, having heard about Nubians almost all my life, I'm on a train heading south to the land of Nubia. I'm embarrassed to admit that I know so very little about the real Nubians. But the ancient Greeks and the Romans knew the Nubians. Magical tales about this distant African people traveled back along the trade routes to Europe. And one of the Nubian kings, named Taharka, is even mentioned in the Bible. My search starts here, at the temple of Abu Simbel. It turns out that this great Egyptian monument is in fact in Nubia, built at a time when the ancient Egyptians ruled it. Most Egyptologists aren't that interested in Nubia, but I found one who's passionate about it. Bassam el-Shama thinks that Nubian history has been ignored for far too long.
Ramesses II, about 1250 BC, a man who ruled our country for about 66 years and 2 months, because that's documented, actually decided him and his very dedicated workers to come here and carve, hewn off the cliffs, a temple dedicated to the Nubian deities. Normally, in temples of Ramesses and other pharaohs, you would find a very typical classic scene of the pharaoh smiting his captives of wars using a mace head, and that's showing his domain and his vigorosity. But in this temple, as I'm going to show you now, we found the facial features of the statues, which was hewn off the cliffs, especially the family that he is introducing to the Nubian brothers and sisters. He's showing his mother, he's showing his daughters, and one of the best examples of this is Our Lady here. First of all, we notice how the facial features are typically Nubian. And then you've got the hairstyle, the Nubian style, the Afro style. And that, of course, the style that all the queens of Egypt wanted to be in the afterlife. And we know that the Nubians were always referred to in ancient Egypt as a sign of beauty. One of the ancient lyrics go, "I wish my lover was a Nubian." So that is exactly the attraction of the face itself.
I have to admit that I like the idea that the daughters of the pharaoh wanted to look like Nubian princesses, even if it was to persuade the people here to worship them.
The Nubian deities.
I don't want to interrupt your narrative, but I have to ask you this. How come you know so much about Nubia? Man, you must, you're the blackest Egyptian I've ever seen.
Nubia doesn't have to make any effort for anybody to fall in love with her. She's a beautiful culture. She's a beautiful, informative culture. She gave us a lot. And when I came down from Alexandria to Aswan, to the beginning of the heart of Nubia, I decided I want to learn the language, I want to learn the songs, I want to learn the dances, and most importantly, I want to know about those people, about their lives, about their history, about their culture, because they're part of me.
So you can marry one of the women, huh?
Exactly. if I got lucky.